Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf nun in Masechet Zevachim. We're making excellent progress. And we began talking about four different kinds of ways we learn things from the Torah. We can use what is known as a hekesh. A hekesh is a connection, and that's when, for example, two topics are either discussed in the same verse or they're discussed right next to each other. And because of the juxtaposition, we say that a rule that applies to one also applies to another. Okay, so that's a hekesh. Then there is the gzeira shava. A gzeira shava is when you have a word. The topics may not be next to each other, but you have a word in one discussion, and that word is also used in another discussion. And then we say, based on tradition, that because those words are said by both of those topics share certain laws, and we connect the two, and we will apply one to the other. Then there is a kal v'chomer. A kal v'chomer is if I can pick up 10 pounds, I can certainly pick up 5 pounds, right? That's true, right? If I can pick up 10 pounds, I can pick up 5 pounds. So that's method of learning number 3. And method of learning number 4 is a binyan av. A binyan av is that if certain rules apply in one situation, and those rules and the situation and the context, etc., are also true for another situation. Again, doesn't have to be right next to each other. That would be a hekesh. Doesn't have to involve the same word. That would be a gzeira shava. Doesn't have to even involve definitive logic, because that would be a kal v'chomer. You can have a binyan av. Binyan av, again, you have the same basic concept in situation A as in situation B, and so as a result, we say that that's a binyan av. What we are discussing right now, and we have done 2 of them so far, is to what extent you can stack these. So we can have a hekesh followed by a hekesh followed by a gzeira shava, a hekesh followed by a kal v'chomer, a hekesh followed by a binyan av, meaning that if we have a hekesh that teaches from A to B, and then either a hekesh that teaches from B to C, or a gzeira shava that teaches from B to C, or a kal v'chomer that teaches from B to C, or a binyan av that teaches from B to C, can we learn all the way from A to C? Okay, that's what we're discussing right now. And we have concluded so far, as we are on the bottom line of Mem Tet Amud Bes, that we've concluded so far that we cannot do a hekesh to a hekesh and teach from A to C. So if topic A is right next to topic B, is right next to topic C, yes, we can learn from topic A to B. Yes, we can learn from topic B to C, but we cannot use those 2 hekeshim to teach from topic A to topic C. And similarly, we cannot have, and this is specifically when we're dealing with korbanot. In other contexts, maybe we can. In other contexts, we probably can. But specifically when we deal with kodshim, when we deal with sacrifices, then you cannot do that. And second, so that you can't do hekesh to hekesh. And second, we learned yesterday that you can't do hekesh to gzeira shava. Same thing. You learn A to B because they're next to each other, and then you learn from B to C because they both have the same word or word phrase or same word concept in the 2 contexts, and we have a tradition that they connect these 2 contexts. So you might have thought that, well, we learned already a rule from A to B. So let's learn that rule that we learned originally from A. We'll learn it from B to C. And the answer is no. In connection with kodshim, we don't do that. We might do that we would do that outside the context of kodshim, outside the context of sacrifices, but in the context of sacrifices, we don't do it. So there are effectively 16 possible combinations, right? Because there's hekesh, gzeira shava, kal v'chomer, binyan av. Those are 4 possible first steps. And then there's 4 possible second steps of hekesh, gzeira shava, kal v'chomer, and binyan av. So we've done 2 out of the 16. By the end of today, we will be almost done with the rest of the 16. That is all we're going to be doing today. So it's a rather straightforward day from a background topic perspective. So let's dive right in. Davar halamed mehekesh choser umelamed bekal v'chomer. If you have something, if we have a rule by topic A, and we learn from it to topic B because of the juxtaposition of the two psukim, so then we can learn from topic B to topic C with the kal v'chomer, and so as a result, the rule that we learn from A will also apply to C. That is what we are saying, and that is Miditana de Be Rabbi Yishmael. The Tana of Rabbi Yishmael's Academy taught this specific rule. So that's a statement, meaning that it was taught that you can do that. So we don't need to bring any evidence for it. It was just taught that that was the case. Davar halame behekesh mahu shialame. So that's topic number 3, right? So we now 3 of 16 cases. So now what about case number 4? Davar halame mehekesh. You learn the first step from A to B with a hekesh. Mahu shialame bebinyanav. Can we learn from B to C using a binyanav concept? So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah lo lichtav tzafona ba'asham. You know what? Let's use some of the things that we've been learning about where we bring these sacrifices to see whether or not we can, in fact, learn from a binyan, from a hekesh, then learn from a binyan av, learn from a hekesh from A to B, and then learn from a binyan av from B to C. So, Rabbi Yirmiyah, we are on the second line of Nun Amud Aleph. Lo lichtav tzafona ba'asham. You know what? Don't tell me that the asham sacrifice needs to be slaughtered in the north. And you know what? V'teisi mi binyan av mechatas, and I will learn it from a binyan av, from a sin offering. That just as a sin offering is a sacrificial offering and it must be slaughtered in the north, so too an asham, which is a sacrificial offering, needs to be slaughtered in the north. So lamai hilchas kasvei. So why was it necessary? Isn't it written there because it's specifically to tell you that you can't use first a hekesh and then a binyanav? So lav lamemru dedavar halame behekesh ein choser umalame bebinyanav. Isn't that the proof that we see that in fact you can't use a hekesh and then a binyanav? No, not necessarily. Ulatamech tesim binyanav me'ola. Well, then you could have learned the requirement of the sacrifice of an asham being slaughtered in the north directly from an ola. My time a lo asi. Why did you not learn it directly from an ola in the first place? Mishum de'ika l'minfra, because there's a refutation that's possible. Mala ola shekain kala, because after all, an ola is completely consumed on the mizbeach. Chatas nami ika lemifra. But and similarly, you could ask a similar question with respect to a sin offering, because a sin offering, malachata shekain mechaperes achayve krisos. A sin offering atones for those who are liable for the kares penalty. So as a result, what do we end up with? You can't necessarily determine from what we've just said that in fact you can't learn from a hekesh then and then apply that learning with a binyanav to a third topic. So chadami chadalo asya tesi chadami tarti. But 1 second, maybe we can still use this contradiction. We can still use this general topic to prove that in fact you can't learn first from a hekesh and then use a binyanav, because maybe we can make a binyanav using the combination of an ola and a chatas. And then we would say, well, why did you need to specifically tell me that it needed to be in the north with an asham? It needed to be in the north we needed to tell you that because you can't use a binyan av to tell you something that you learned through a hekesh over to a new topic. So mihai tesi the lo nichtav rachmana ola, but tesi mechatas v'asham. Well, why not not have it right, the fact that it needs to be in the north with respect to the Ola, and we can learn that it needs to be in the north from the fact that a Chatas and an Asham need to be in the north. No, you can't do that because Malahanach Shekain Mechaprin. Well, those two are atonement. An asham deals with the sin, whereas an asham taloi deals with a sin that you're not sure whether you did. An asham vadai deals with the other kinds of sins. A chatas deals with a sin that's subject to to the penalty of kares. So bottom line is, though you can't learn from asham and chatas over to ola. So lo nichtav rachmana b'chatas. Okay, so maybe let's not write the rule by a chatas. V'tezi mehanach, and we'll learn it from the other two. Malahana shekain zacharim. But no, you can't do that because both the ola and the asham are male animals, whereas a chatas can be female. So no, so all right, so fine. So we can't do it that way either. So lo nichtav the asham. Let's not write it by an asham, and we'll learn it from the chatas and the ola together. V'tesi mehanach, and we'll learn it from the other two. No, you can't do that either because malahanach shekain yeshnan b'tzibur kiviyachid. There are korban tzibors. There are communal sacrifices that are either a sin offering or an ola offering, but you can never have a communal asham offering. And so as a result, that isn't possible. And so as a result, you can't, it's something unique to an asham, and therefore you can't learn from the other two to an asham. So davar halamed b'gzeir. So now we go back to our question. So davar halamed b'gzeira shava so bottom line is we have not given a definitive proof in either direction. We do not know. We come to the conclusion that when it comes to a binyan av, we cannot answer the question. And in fact, we will see that whether the binyan av is the first step or the last step, in every situation, we are effectively in either an explicit teku or we are in a question mark that the Gemara was not able to prove. So we do not know whether when it comes to kodshim, you can do a hekesh followed by a binyan av, a gzeira shava followed by a binyan av, or a kal v'chomer followed by a binyan av, or a binyan av followed by a binyan av. And we similarly don't know that whether you could do a binyan av followed by a hekesh binyan av followed by a gzeira shava, or a binyan av followed by a kal v'chomer. But we will get to many of those other cases over the course of the rest of today. But in the meantime, we now turn to case number 5. Again, the first two cases, hekesh followed by hekesh and hekesh followed by gzeira shava, we learned yesterday, and then both of them cannot be done. We learned at the beginning of today that a hekesh followed by a kal v'chomer is okay. We just came to the conclusion that you don't know whether hekesh followed by a binyan av can work with respect to hektish. So now we're going to talk about a gzeira shava. So davar halamed b'gzeira shava. If you start with a gzeira shava, mahu sheyalamed behekesh. Can you now we have a gzeira shava, we have the same word in topic A and in topic B, and we have a tradition that we allow us to learn the rules of topic A to the rules of topic B, and so as a result, we now know something new about topic B. And now the question is, can we use a hekesh? Topic B happens to be dealt with either in the same sentence or in the next paragraph or very close in the Torah right next to topic C. So can we say that the rule that we learned from A will now also apply to C? So davar halamed b'gzeira shava, ma'u sheyalamed behekesh. Can we now apply it through a hekesh to something else? So Rav Papa, Rav Papa says, I can give you an example. Here's the first case of Rav Papa. We're going to see Rav Papa a couple times today. Bezos Toras Zevachim im al Toda. We have this following juxtaposition. First, it says, this is the law of the shlamim sacrifice, and then very right next to it, it says, right, this is Psukim Yud Aleph and Yud Bet in Perek Zayin of Vayikra, that it says, right next to it, it talks about the Todah sacrifice. And so what does that teach us? So, Lamanu L'Toda Sheba Min HaMaaser. So this juxtaposition teaches us that just as a shlamim can be brought using meiser, mid'ashkechan shlamim de'asu mimeiser. So as a result, we're now this juxtaposition, the hekesh, is going to tell us that so too, that since we have that a shlamim can come from meiser, we can also apply the same rule to a toda. So that is step number 2 in our teaching, meaning again, the question is can we apply Gzeira Shava to a hekesh, to a third topic? So let's take a look. The topic number 2, topic B, is the shlamim sacrifice. And the shlamim sacrifice can be brought using Meiser Sheni money. So too, the Toda, which is juxtaposed to it with a hekesh, can also be brought using Meiser Sheni money. So, and how do we know shlamim gufayu minalan? How do I know that a shlamim itself can be used? Can be purchased with the Meiser Sheni money? Well, that's a Gzeira Shava, Diksiv Sham Sham. There are 2 psukim. One pasuk is Rashi now helps us out with the quotes from the psukim. It's 15 lines down in the narrow lines on Nun Amud Aleph. B'shlamim ksiv v'zavachta shlamim v'ochalta sham. Again, that the word sham is there. That I'm going to slaughter a shlamim and I'm going to eat it there. Uba meiser ksiv. And when it comes to meiser, it says v'achalta lifnei Hashem elokecha b'makom asher yivchar l'shakein shemo sham. So we have the word sham in both places. We have a tradition that connects it. So as a result, ma'asar degancha tiroshcha v'yitzarecha ub'chorot, that you can use those things for a shlamim. And so as a result, now we see that we have a Gzeira Shava to begin with, from Meiser Sheni to shlamim, and that connects and says that the shlamim is allowed to be used. You're allowed to bring a shlamim from Meiser Sheni, and then we have a hekesh that says that you're allowed to from Meiser Sheni. That just as you're allowed to use Meiser Sheni to bring a shlamim, well, you're also allowed to use Meiser Sheni to bring a toda. So the answer to the question is, can you do a Gzeira Shava followed by a hekesh? The answer is yes. Well, no. Amar le Mar Zutra braid the Reb Mari le Ravina Meiser Dagan Chulin Ba'almahu. You can't. The first step in this learning process was from Meiser Sheni. And Meiser Sheni, when it comes to grains, that is considered chulin. And what we're trying to learn here is, can we do these 2 steps in Kudshim? And you're taking the first step. The first step is coming from chulin, not Kudshim. So as a result, your proof is not valid. So Amar Le Ravina says back to Mar Zutra, no, it is a valid. Amara. No, when we say this rule, Lamed Kodesh Umelamed Kodesh, we're focusing on the middle and the conclusion. It's okay for the first one. When we say that you can't do certain kinds of learnings from in the context of Kodshim, it's focusing on the last 2 steps. The first step isn't crucial to determining whether this rule of Kodshim is involved. It's the second and the third step. And here in this second and third step, it's shlamim and then toda are topics B and C. And so as a result, this is in fact a proof that it works. So that is the debate between Rav Papa and Ravina on the one hand, and Mar Zutra on the other hand. We are going to come back to that debate over the course of the rest of today.
Don't we say a toda is a form of shlamim?
A toda is, on some respects, a form of shlamim, but it is unique, and as a result, you would not be able to learn all the laws because some of the laws are different. For example, it's eaten at a different amount of time. You have to bring 40 loaves of grain-based bread/matzah, whether it's leavened or unleavened, but the point is you need to bring 40 loaves. So there are unique requirements for it. So we would need some kind of lesson to tell us which of the rules associated with shlamim are going to apply to a toda. And so here, what we're saying is that we're allowing the application of this law that you can bring you can use Meiser Sheni to bring a shlamim, and we're going to use the hekesh to apply that to the Toda, even though the whole way we learned by a shlamim that you're allowed to do that was through a Gzeira Shava. And
So
so
you're saying Meiser Sheni, you're
well,
referring to the Poda of Meiser Sheni, the Kesef, right? Isn't that what you're referring?
Yes, correct. It would be taking money of Meiser Sheni
Right.
that you have brought to Yerushalayim, and then and using it to buy an animal. Correct. Or not necessarily, because it could also be that you brought the grain that you had to Yerushalayim, and you're going to use that grain for the challah rolls that you're going to be with your Toda. So it's not necessarily that you have to have redeemed it, but yes, when we think about the animal, that's most likely going to be a case of redemption.
But you can't bring the grain as a substitute for the animal, though.
No.
And so that's what I mean. It makes more sense.
Yes, exactly. That's why I was agreeing with you.
To poda the Meiser Sheni and use that to buy the shlamim or the
correct. Exactly. And so that's the story. So we have now this debate. So that is topic number 5. Again, we have a 4x4 grid of Hekesh Gzeira Shava Kal V'chomer Binyan Av on the one side, and then across the top we have again Hekesh Gzeira Shava Kal V'chomer and Binyan Av on the other way. And we now have that when it comes to Gzeira Shava followed by Hekesh, we have Rav Papa and Ravina saying yes, and Mar Zutra saying you haven't brought me any proof one way or the other. It's not clear. Okay, so now what about Davar Halamed B'Gzeira Shava, Ma'oshi Lamed B'Gzeira Shava? So, if we're focusing on cells, it's the cell 2-2, right? So 2 down, 2 across.
Make a diagram of this so we could see this maybe next time.
Yeah. I mean, there is a diagram. Again, if I wasn't coming back from Israel, if this was a Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, I would have done that. I have a diagram right here. I'll put it on the screen for just a moment so that you can see it. And there actually is a separate diagram that I found a couple pages later in the end in the art scroll. They have it doing as a summary, which I'll show it, God willing, tomorrow. So, but in any event, that's the point. The point is that we're working our way through these different rules, and so now Gzeira Shava followed by Gzeira Shava. So Amar Rebbe, this is case number 6. Amar Rebbe Baruch Kama Tanya Solus Merubeches. So we have this scalded fine flour. So that is what is being used for some of the loaves. There are 40 loaves, 30 are unleavened, 10 are leavened, and the 10 that are leavened are way about the same as the 30 that are unleavened. But in any event, the one set of the 10 that are unleavened are the scalded fine flour mixed with oil. So lamanu l'revucha sheba solus. So obviously that they needed to come from that the scalded loaf needs to come from fine flour. Chalos minayin. How do I know that the other 10 unleavened loaves also that are referred to as chalot loaves, even though they were unleavened, they also need to come from fine flour? Talmud lomar chalot. We have a Gzeira Shava. So that is Gzeira Shava number 1. So Rikikin Minayin. How do I know that the Rikikin also are, which are also, they're the unleavened wafers. They're what might be viewed almost as matzah, although I think there might be oil in them. Talmud Lomar, matzot. So we have a Gzeira Shava from the unleavened chalot to the unleavened rikikin. So again, what do we have? We have it explicit when it comes to the merbeches. We have a Gzeira Shava that teaches to the chalot. And then we have the a Gzerah that teaches to the Rakikin. So as a result, we have a Gzerah from 1 to A to B. We have a Gzerah from B to C. So that shows that clearly we can do Gzerah followed by Gzerah. So Amarle Ravina says back to Rami Bar Chama, no, maybe not. Maybe this is not a good proof. Mimai to matzos michalos gamar. How do you know that the Gzerah that you're thinking about is matzos from the chalot to matzos of the Rakikin? Dilma me'afa tanur gamor. Maybe it is from the mincha offering. And so as a result, it is not reliant on the first Gzerah Shava of Chalot. In fact, because by the mincha offering, it explicitly says it needs to be fine flour. So as a result, it's just two completely separate Gzerah Shavas. It's not a Gzerah Shava that builds on another Gzerah Shava. So as a result, your proof is not a good proof. So Ella Amar Rava offers.
So we can't connect A to C then.
No, it's A to B and C to D.
Right,
Or
but we
D to
right,
C. D to C. Okay,
D
so
to
the point is that they're not connected at all, according to
Right.
Ravina's. Now, obviously, both of them had different traditions as to what the word was, where the word matzot was coming from. So they had the different traditions, and so as a result, it would not work. While it would work for Rami Bar Chama, it doesn't work for Ravina. So Elam or Rava offers an alternative that does work. Tanya vikirbo ufirsho bahotzi. When it comes to the Kohen Gadol's bull, it says, and its innards and its waist he shall remove the entire bull to outside the camp, meaning that he has to take the whole thing outside. Milamid shemotzio shalem. That this verse, which teaches about the hide of the bull and all its flesh with its head and its feet and its innards and its waist, all of it goes outside the temple in a whole manner because it's going to be burned as a whole outside the Beis Hamikdash. It's important to note that certain sacrifices, none of it was burned on the altar, and all of it was burned outside, and the Kohen Gadol's bull is exactly one of them.
How does he bring it outside? How does he carry it? In a bag? He carries, I mean, what's
That's
it?
a good question. I
It
do
could
not
fall
know
out
that.
of his hands on the ground, a little bit of blood, a little bit of
Well,
innards.
I've got to imagine that they had some kind of stretcher or something because these animals are not light. One person is going to pick up most of these animals. So, but I do not know the answer as to how precisely it was carried. Maybe over the course of our Zevachim learning together, we can see if we can explore how that is. But I don't have a great answer for you. If I learn that, I will make sure to reference it. Yachol Yisrefenu Shalem. Now, I might have thought since you have to bring the whole thing out as a whole unit, maybe it also gets burned as a whole unit. No, Nemar Kan Rosho Uchra'av, the Nemar Lahalan Rosho Uchra'av. We have effectively a Gzerah Shava that teaches that that when it comes to an Ola, its head and feet are mentioned separately, and so too here. So Malahalan, just by that Ola, when it's burned on the altar, it's al yedei nituach. It's after it's been dismembered. Afkan al yedei nituach. So yes, it needs to be brought out as a whole animal, but when it gets burned, it does not. It gets burned as a partial animal. It gets burned as once it's been cut up and dismembered. So malahalan behavshet afkan nami behavshet. But one second, once you're learning with a Gzerah Shava, and what I would say that just as the Ola needs to be skinned before it's burned, so too this bull of the Kohen Gadol would need to be skinned before it's burned. Tamalomar bekirbo ufirsho. No, we have the statement of its innards and its waist, and in fact, it even references the hide of the bull earlier in that pasuk. It references the hide itself. So all of it is getting burned. So my Talmuda, what is this teaching? It shows that so Amarav Papa Kashem Shapirsho Bekirbo Kach Besaro Baaro. That just as the skin is with the just as the waist is left inside the animal, because after all, you don't want to pull the waste out to burn it separately. That would be disgusting. So too, the flesh is with the skin. So basically, we leave everything together. So although it's cut up, it's not going to be although it's cut up, it is not going to be separated. It's not going to be also skinned. So as a result, we learn from the ola the fact that it's going to be cut up into pieces, and we learn from it from the own context. We learn that it's going to be not skinned. Vitanya, and we have another brisa, because we have this, of course, has not given us the two different examples. Remember, what we're trying to prove is that we can use one Gzeira Shava followed by another Gzeira Shava. That's what we're trying to prove here. And and Vitanya. So now we have another brisa that's going to bring in the other Gzeira Shava. Rebbe Omer Nemar Kan Oru Basar Uferesh, that we have in connection with the Yom Kippur bull and goat, as opposed to the Kohen Gadol's bull for making a mistake and doing some kind of accidental sin. So or incorrect ruling. So there's also the Yom Kippur bull and goat. And so, and that is also going to be burned outside the Beit HaMikdash. As we turn to Nun Amabet, V'ne'amar lahalan oru basar uferesh, and it also talks about the Kohen Gadol's bull. It says the hide, the flesh, and the waist. So malahalan. So now we're using a Gzeira Shava, right? So we had one Gzeira Shava from Ola to the Kohen Gadol's bull, the Par Kohen HaMashiach, and we now are using another Gzeira Shava to learn from the Kohen Gadol's bull to the bull and goat on Yom Kippur. So mala halan al yedei nituach shelo b'hafshed, that just as when it came to the Kohen Gadol's bull, we are going to dismember it without skinning it. Afkan al yedei nituach shelo b'hafshed. So to here, we're going to dismember it without skinning it. So yes, the fact that we don't skin it is only learned from the Kohen Gadol's bull. But how do we know that you can cut it up? That was all the way back from Ola. So we learned the concept of cutting it up from Ola to the Kohen Gadol's bull, Par Kohen HaMashiach. And then we learned from Par Kohen HaMashiach to the Par V'Seir Shel Yom HaKippurim. And now we've learned a Gzeira Shava followed by a Gzeira Shava. Everybody agrees. And so as a result, it's clear that even by Kodshim, you can do Gzeira Shava followed by Gzeira Shava. Okay, so now we're on to number 7. Davar halamed.
Wait, now this animal is shechted. The blood is spilled and then it's cut up. Is that right? Is that the order?
Well, the blood is spilled inside the Kodesh.
Right.
The body itself is taken outside the temple. That's slaughtered outside the Heichel to begin with. It's only blood that's being brought in. It's slaughtered on the north side of the Mizbeach. Of the Mizbeach. That's how we got to this topic in the first place.
Right.
So it's slaughtered on the north side of the Mizbeach. The body is now taken outside, presumably by different Kohanim, taken outside the city of Yerushalayim, where it is going to be burned. The blood is now going to be taken, depending on which sacrifice we're talking about, into the Kodesh, into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, if we're talking about the bull and the goat on Yom Kippur, but that's going to be taken into the Kodesh and Kodesh HaKodeshim. Those are going to in two different places, but none of the body of these animals is going to be burnt on either the inner altar. Of course, no animal is burnt on the inner altar, and it's not going to be burnt on the outer altar. It's all being burned outside Yerushalayim.
So these two actions done simultaneously, or is the blood brought in first while the animal waits outside, or do they take the animal wait outside first and then sprinkle the blood?
Not clear. Not clear to me. I believe because these are not. I'm not sure that we have. I don't think that we've seen that particular topic yet. but it would seem to me that certainly the blood should not come later, that it should come immediately. But it's not clear to me that you can't be also bringing the animal out at the same time. I presume that the animal is being brought out at the same time by different Kohanim, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay. So now again, we're going through this process of the different four limudim, and we're now on number 7. Davar halamed b'gzeira shava ma'u sheyilame b'kavachomer. You learn topic A to topic B from a gzeira shava, and now can we learn from topic B to a C with a kavachomer? Well, kavachomer, of course you can do that, because ma hekesh she'ein melamed behekesh, when it comes to a hekesh of topics that are right next to each other, you can't go from one hekesh to another hekesh. Imid Rava, imid Ravina. We already saw 2 different sources yesterday why you can't do that. So melamed bekal v'chomer, but yet you can do a hekesh followed by a kal v'chomer. Miditana debe Rabbi Yishmael, because that was explicitly taught. That was the first thing that we learned today, is that you can do that. Rabbi Yishmael, the Tana debe Rabbi Yishmael taught us. So gzeira shava hamelamedet behekesh. So 1 second, when you have a case of a gzeira shava, which can be taught with a hekesh. We can have a gzeira shava followed by hekesh. Midar Rav Papa, as we saw from Rav Papa, Eino din shetilamed b'kal v'chomer. Well, then we should certainly be able to learn it with a kal v'chomer. Well, yes, that's true, but that your kal v'chomer that you just made depends on Rav Papa. Rav Papa. That's good according to Ravina, who agrees with Rav Papa and defended Rav Papa. But according to Mar Zutra, who disagreed with Rav Papa, what can you say? No, so we'll make a different kal v'chomer. El kal v'chomer, here's the kal v'chomer. Uma hekesh she'ein melamed behekesh. Same starting place. A hekesh cannot be taught with a second hekesh. You can't go from, if you go from A to B with the hekesh number 1, you cannot use hekesh number 2 to go from B to C. Imi de Rabba, imi de Ravina. Again, everybody agrees with that. Melamed b'kal v'chomer, and yet you can learn from hekesh to a kal v'chomer. Miditana debe Rabbi Yishmael. That was explicitly taught by the Tana debe Rabbi Yishmael. Again, first thing that we learned today. Bottom line of Mem Tet Amud Bet. Gzeira shava. But hamelamedet b'gzeira shava chaverta. But when it comes to a gzeira shava, we just saw an explicit example where a gzeira shava can be used to then use another gzeira shava. Specifically, the fact that the Yom Kippur bull and goat are cut up before they're burned is learned from a gzeira shava from the Kohen Gadol's bull, which in turn is learned from a gzeira shava from an ola. So that shows that you can do gzeira shava followed by gzeira shava. So midah Rami Bar Chama, as Rami Bar Chama taught. So Eino din shetilame b'kal v'chomer. Well, it certainly then should be able to do a kal v'chomer. Meaning you can't do hekesh by hekesh, but you can do gzeira shava by gzeira shava. So if you can't do hekesh by hekesh, but you can do gzeira shava by gzeira shava. So even though you might not be able to, and yet you can do gzeira shava followed by a kal v'chomer, well then certainly you should be able to do hekesh. But you can do hekesh followed by kal v'chomer. So certainly you should be able to do gzeira shava followed by kal v'chomer. And so as the answer to number 7 is an absolute yes, we are allowed to do it. Okay, topic number 8. This one's really simple. Teiku. We don't have any proof one way or the other. We're not going to be able to answer it. So now we go to the third row. The third row is davar halamed b'kal v'chomer. You learned something with a kal v'chomer. So mahu sheyilame b'hekesh. Can we use a hekesh to teach from it? So kal v'chomer umag gzeira shava she'enu lamod lameda b'hekesh midah Rabbi Yochanan. We saw that a gzeira shava cannot. You can't go from a hekesh to a gzeira shava, but melamed b'hekesh. But you can go from. But you can go from a gzeira shava to a hekesh, midah Rav Papa, as Rav Papa said. So kal v'chomer halamed mehekesh. But so then certainly you should do, and you can do a kal v'chomer, which you can do a hekesh, midatana de Rabbi Yishmael. Again, that was the first thing that we learned today. Eino din sheyilame behekesh. Well, then certainly you should be able to go from a kal v'chomer to a hekesh. So that's our proof. That's our Kal V'chomer. And of course, again, this Kal V'chomer depended on Rav Papa. Hanicha lamanda islay de Rav Papa. El lamanda leislay de Rav Papa. Ma'ika lamemar. The answer is Teku. So again, so for Rav Papa, you can go in either order, that you can go in either order. Either Hekesh followed by Kal V'chomer or Kal V'chomer followed by Hekesh. But according to Mar Zutra, you can go Hekesh followed by Kal V'chomer, but we don't know whether you can go Kal V'chomer followed by Hekesh. That's not clear because he doesn't hold that you can do, because he thinks that the same Teku applies when you have Gzera Shava followed by Hekesh. So it doesn't work. So, okay, so that brings us.
Why would it be if we have one man de Omer, Rav Papa, who says you can go? Why do we have a teku? Teku doesn't that usually occur when we have
that teku is only for Mar Zutra.
Oh,
that teku is only for Mar Zutra.
But usually in Shas it refers to there is no decision among any of the Rabbanim. Usually, right?
I would say yes. Certainly, usually that's the case. But we see twice in this context, we're seeing that and maybe it's specifically because we just use the term teku in a general way, but right now we're using teku in a specific way. But you're absolutely right that usually teku is according to everybody. So davar alame b'kal v'chomer ma'oshi alame b'gzera shava. So now we go to item number 10 in our list. First we have a kal v'chomer, then a gzera shava. So Kal V'chomer, we can make a Kal V'chomer that should work. Umag Gzera Shava she'ena l'meidam behekesha mid Rebbe Yochanan. We saw already that a Gzera Shava followed by a hekesh does not work. That was what we saw at the end of the day yesterday. 1 second, let me just make sure I got that right. Gzera Shava followed by a hekesh. 1 second. Gzera Shava followed by a hekesh. No, this is a hekesh followed by a Gzera Shava. So a hekesh followed by a Gzera Shava, right? If you can't use a hekesh, then do a Gzera Shava. That's what we saw yesterday. That was the last thing that we learned yesterday. The Rebbe Yochanan, as we saw from Rebbe Yochanan, Milamed b'Gzera Shava, and yet you can do a Gzera Shava followed by a Gzera Shava, mid Rami Bar Chama. That was the example of Rami Bar Chama, that we had 2 Gzera Shavas. That was the one about cutting up the Ola, then you can cut up the Par Kohen and Mashiach, and then you can cut up the Par and the goat and the bull on Yom Kippur. So Kal V'chomer halame behekesh midatana deberei Rabbi Yishmael eino din shetalame b'gzera shava. So now that we have the when it comes to a Kal V'chomer, which again we can do following a hekesh. A hekesh followed by a Kal V'chomer, it does work, as we learned at the beginning of today. So certainly you should be able to follow a Gzera Shava with a Kal V'chomer. So I'm sorry, follow a Kal V'chomer followed by a Gzera Shava. So again, so just as we had that you can do a Gzera Shava followed by a Gzera Shava, so and yet a Kal V'chomer is even easier to be the second item. So as a result, so we can do a Gzera Shava, a Kal V'chomer followed by a Gzera Shava. Okay, so davar halamei b'Kal V'chomer ma'oshi alami b'Kal V'chomer. So what about a Kal V'chomer followed by a Kal V'chomer? So again, Kal V'chomer, we can make a Kal V'chomer about it. So ma Gzera Shava she'eno l'meida b'hekesh. You can't use a Gzera Shava to learn from a hekesh. So, mid the Rebbe Yochanan, as we saw yesterday, that was Rebbe Yochanan. That was the last thing we learned yesterday. Milamed b'Kal V'chomer. And yet, today, we saw that, and the first thing that we saw today is that you can use a Kal V'chomer to learn from a hekesh. K'da Amran. As we've said several times already, that was the teaching of Rabbi Yishmael, Debei Rabbi Yishmael. Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael. So, Kal V'chomer, halamed mehekesh. Well, when it comes to a Kal V'chomer, which we can learn from a hekesh, so midatana deberei Rabbi Yishmael. So eino din she'alamed b'Kal V'chomer. Well, then certainly you should be able to learn it with a Kal V'chomer. V'zeu Kal V'chomer ben Kal V'chomer. This is a Kal V'chomer, which is the son of a Kal V'chomer. This is a double Kal V'chomer. This is exactly what we're trying to prove. So ben beno shel kal v'chomer hu. No, it's not a son of a kal v'chomer. It's a ben beno shel kal v'chomer. You're relying on three different kal v'chomers in this context. You're relying on the kal v'chomer of the fact that you start with the fact that a Gzera Shava may be followed by the Kal V'chomer. You can then get a Kal V'chomer may be followed by a Kal V'chomer, and then you get that the combination of a Kal V'chomer with a Kal V'chomer. That's three different steps. And so, as Rashi understands it, and so as a result, that's not a valid. That isn't a proof. In fact, maybe that doesn't work. Ella kal v'chomer, here's the kal v'chomer. Uma hekesh ein elam behekesh. When it comes to a hekesh followed by a hekesh, you can't do it. That was the first thing that we learned in this whole series. That was item number 1 on our list. Imi de Rava, imi de Ravina. We had both a Rava's opinion and Ravina as to the source of that. But yet, melamed b'kal v'chomer, everybody agrees that you can go hekesh followed by kal v'chomer, meditana debe Rabbi Yishmael, as the Tana of Rabbi Yishmael taught, which was the first thing that we saw today. So kal v'chomer halamed behekesh. Well, then certainly you can use. So certainly in the case, when it comes to a kal v'chomer, which we can do from a hekesh. We can do a hekesh followed by a kal v'chomer, meditane de Rabbi Yishmael, as Rabbi Tana and Rabbi Yishmael taught themselves. Eino din shi'alamed b'kal v'chomer. Well, then certainly it should be able to go to a kal v'chomer. So as a result, we have a 2-step process, and that is going to show that it's a hey v'zehu kal v'chomer bein kal v'chomer, and so that is in fact a kal v'chomer followed by a kal v'chomer, and that shows that you can do it. And so again, we are now 8, 9, 10, 11 through our going through the 16 different possible combinations. And we will continue with those combinations, God willing, tomorrow. But we have now, again, today we did 3 through 11. And tomorrow, God willing, we'll do 12 through 16.
So one question here, when we're saying we're learning X from Y, whether it's Gezerah Shava or Kal V'chomer or a Binyan Av, whatever it is, when we're learning this one and we're learning the next one, what are we saying, that we learn a particular topic from this and then we're expanding on the topic, we're learning something else from the derivation that we got in the first place?
The best example is the great example is that we actually had one example today of the requirement to cut up the sacrifice before it's burned. It starts by Ola. We know an Ola in the own context has to be cut up. We then apply a Gzera Shava from Ola to the Par Kohen HaMashiach, the par that the Kohen brings if he makes a mistake. And that's with a Gzera Shava. And the rule that we move from 1 to the 2, from A to B, is the requirement to cut it up before it gets burned. In the Ola context, it's cut it up before it's put on the altar. But in the context B, it's cut it up before it's burned outside the city of Israel, outside of the city of Yerushalayim. Even though when you take it out whole. But when you actually do the burning outside the city of Yerushalayim, you need to cut it up. And then we have another Gzera Shava, a Gzera Shava from Par Kohen HaMashiach to the Par V'Seir Shel Yom HaKippurim. And now we're going to say that rule that we learned all the way from Ola is going to now apply to the Par V'Izim Shel Yom HaKippurim. And so as a result, the bull and the goat on Yom Kippur, they too, before they are burned outside of Yerushalayim, they too, when they need to be cut up before they get burned. And so that's exactly the process. That's exactly the point that you're making. What we're the rule that we learn from A to B based on lesson number 1, whether it's a Hekesh, a Gzera Shava, a Kal V'chomer, a Binyan Av. The question is can we learn that rule that came all the way from A and is now at B? Can we use a Hekesh, a Gzera Shava, a Kal V'chomer, a Binyan Av to learn from B to C? And now this is specifically in the context of um, of Kodshim, because outside the context of Kodshim, it seems like we could definitely do all of it. But specifically in Kodshim, we've seen that you cannot do some of them. And that's what we're going through now, is to go through all of 16 of these to figure out which ones we can do and which ones we can't do.
But it seems like the example you gave when we applied the cutting up and the burning, the Ola
Ola to Par Kohen Mashiach,
well,
and Par Kohen
Mashiach.
Mashiach.
And then it seems like we took the ruling from A and applied it to C.
Yes, that's exactly what we're effectively doing.
Are we learning through all this process that when we apply from A to B, we can take from B to C? That's
Well,
the sort of
the
question.
answer to that question is yes. You can take, meaning sometimes, and again, the example of the going from the Par Kohen Mashiach to the Par Seir Shel Yom Kippurim is if I said Izim sometimes, my apologies. Par Seir Shel Yom Kippurim is the following: is that if in fact the when we learned the first step, we also learned that when it comes to the Par Kohen HaMashiach, that you leave the waste product in the animal, and we don't skin the animal. Those two things, which are specifically only for Par Kohen HaMashiach, we, along with the rule about cutting it up, which came all the way from Ola, we now add a new rule that is specifically by the Par Kohen HaMashiach, and also apply that to the Par V'Seir Shel Yom Kippurim.
So that could be from a different limud, maybe a
Correct,
hekesh,
correct. Well,
maybe a
it's
hekesh,
from
or whatever it is.
It's not from the original hekesh. Correct. The point is that in the second Gzeira Shava that we're taking from Par Kohen Mashiach to the Par V'Seir Shel Yom Kippurim, we are not only taking the law that we learned from A, namely the Ola, but we're talking about other laws that we have from Par Kohen Mashiach. We're taking them with us to the Par V'Seir Shel Yom Kippurim.
And
so
that could be a different limud. That could be either whatever it is, whatever. I don't know. I'm not going through all the permutations.
It's a limud from the pasuk itself. It's from within the context. So it's not the application. It's not. We learned it not from the application of a Gzeira Shava, a Binyanav, a Hekesh, or a Kal V'chomer. It was just learned from the wording of the verses associated with the Par Kohen Mashiach. So the wording of those verses, not only are we going to take the lesson that we already learned from Ola and brought it to Par Kohen Mashiach, but we're going to learn the lesson that we have within the psukim of Par Kohen Mashiach, and we'll take both of those and bring them to Par V'Seir Shel Yom Kippurim.
But so that's not a separate limud. But the question I have is, if we learn, let's say, Gezerah Shava from A to B, for example, can we now say that B and C have a hekesh, that we can also apply B to C to learn C from B? That would be, I'm thinking
that is exactly what the Gemara is going through right now.
Okay.
Is going through that, and in terms of your question of whether if you have a Gzeira Shava from A to B and then a Hekesh from B to C, that's a debate between Rav Papa and Ravina on the one hand and Mar Zutra on the other hand. Rav Papa and Ravina say definitely, and we can even give you an example. And
Right.
Mar Zutra says that's not a great example, and therefore I'm not sure whether you can do it.
Uh-huh. I mean, I just happen to pick those two limuds, but
yeah,
it could
I understand.
be
But the point
Binyanav
is
or
that that's true
Kol
for
V'chomer, whatever it is.
all 16 combinations.
Right.
That's what we're going through right now, and we're now done with 11 of them.
So that's the discussion, whether when we have from A to B, and then you take something from B to C by a different limud.
Correct.
Okay, it gets a little confusing. Yeah, I mean,
it's more than a little confusing, but that's why we tried to go through it step by step, and and say specifically which item we're on in each item. But yes, it's definitely not simple.
Right, but you mentioned the one of the limud was within the context of the pasuk, but that's not exactly the same thing as taking another one of these tools. That's a little
Correct.
different. That's something a little different, where it's a little more obvious. You get within the context of the pasuk from from Mashiach
Right. Well, the
to
point is that we're taking it with something else. But yes, absolutely.
right. That's just not one of these 4 or 5 different tools.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Yishikoach. Looking forward to continuing tomorrow. Again, Friday I will be only remote.
Friday.
Yeah.
All
Have
right.
a great week.